And good morning. Let's go ahead and do lesson 51. This is the second lesson of the story we've been reading, Pony Penning Day. So remember, as we left off yesterday, what's the little boy's name? The little boy, what's his name? It's Maureen, and I forgot the little boy's name. Paul. So Paul is on the horse, Watch Eyes, and he's out getting the straggler because that's what his leader told him to do. They're on Assateague Island. This is Pony Penning Day. This is the day in July, the only day, once a year, they go and they get all these wild ponies and they take them back and they sell them. But he's there also looking for Phantom. All right, so let's look at page 160. Before we begin, we've got 3 words here that I want to look at. This first one, he got on the horse warily because he knew the horse might buck him off. Okay, so warily means cautiously, with caution. Okay, the horse collided with the fence because it didn't jump high enough. So collided means crashed into. Their mounts finished the race faster than any other horses in history. Mount is usually another word for a horse that has a saddle on it, ready to go. Okay, so let's go ahead then and look at page 160. And I'm going to read, and of course you've got to follow along just like you're reading yourself, okay? Now, and as we read, I want you to think of these things and look for these things. Will Paul be able to find the straggler that he's so determined to find? And what or who is Misty, okay? All right, let's look at page 160 and let's begin. Watch Eyes plunged on. There was a kind of glory and pursuit that made Paul and the horse one. They were trailing nothing but swaying bushes. They were giving chase to a mirage. Always it moved on, showing itself only in quivering leaves or moving shadows. What was that? In the clump of myrtle bushes just ahead. Paul reined in. He could scarcely breathe for the wild beating of his heart. Here it was again. A silver flash. It looked like mist with the sun on it. And just beyond the mist, he caught sight of a long tail of copper and silver. He gazed awestruck. It could be the Phantom's tail, he breathed. It is. And the silver flash, it's not mist at all, but a brand new colt, he murmured. He glanced about him helplessly. If only he could think. How could he drive the Phantom and her colt to Tom's Point? Warily he approached the myrtle thicket. Just then the colt let out a high, frightened whinny. In that little second, Paul knew that he wanted more than anything in the world to keep the mother and the colt together. Shivers of joy raced up and down his spine. His breath came faster. He made a firm resolution. I'll buy you both, he promised. But how far had he come? Was it 10 miles to Tom's Point or 2? Would it be best to drive them down the beach or through the woods? As if in answer, a loud bugle rang through the woods. It was the Pied Piper, the pinto stallion in command of the herd, and unmistakably his voice came from the direction of Tom's Point. The Phantom pricked her ears. She wheeled around and almost collided with Watch Eyes in her haste to find the band. She wanted the Pied Piper for protection. Behind her trotted the foal, all shining and clean with its newness. Paul laughed weakly. He was not driving the Phantom after all. She and her colt were leading him. They were leading him to Tom's Point. Tom's Point was a protected piece of land where the marsh was hard and the grass especially sweet. About 70 wild ponies, exhausted by their morning's run, stood browsing quietly as if they were in a corral. Only occasionally they looked up at their captors. The good meadow and their own weariness kept them peaceful prisoners. At a watchful distance, the roundup men rested their mounts and relaxed. It was like the lull in the midst of a storm. All was quiet on the surface, yet there was an undercurrent of tension. You could tell it in the narrowed eyes of the men, their subdued voices, and their too-easy laughter. Suddenly the laughter stilled. Mouths gaped in disbelief. Eyes rounded. For a few seconds, no one spoke at all. Then a shout that was half wonder and half admiration went up from the men. Paul Beebe, was bringing in the phantom and a colt. The roundup men were swarming around Paul, buzzing with questions. "Beats all," he heard someone say. "For 2 years we've been trying to round up the phantom, and along comes a spindling youngster to show us up." 'Twas the little colt that hindered her. Of course it was. It's the newest colt in the bunch. May not stand the swim. If we lose only one colt, it'll be a good day's work. The men accepted Paul as one of them now, a real roundup man. They were clapping him on the shoulder and trying to get him to talk. "Ain't they a shaggy-looking bunch?" Kim Horsepepper asked. "Except for Misty," Paul said, pointing toward the phantom's colt. "Her coat is silky. The mere thought of touching it sent shivers through him. Misty," he thought to himself wonderingly. "Why, I've named her." He looked out across the water. 2 lines of boats were forming a pony-way across the channel. He saw the cluster of people in the mounts waiting on the shores of Chincoteague, and he knew that somewhere among them was Maureen. It was like a relay race. Soon she would carry on. "Could I swim my mount across the channel alongside the phantom?" Paul asked Wild Maddox anxiously. Wild shook his head. "Watch Eyes is all tuckered out," he said. "Besides, there's a tradition in the way things is handled on Pony Pinning Day. There's mounted men for the roundup, and there's boatmen to herd 'em across the channel," he explained. "Tide's out," he called in clipped tones. "Current is slack. Time for the ponies to be swimmed across. Let's go." Suddenly the beach was wild with commotion. From three sides, the roundup men came rushing at the ponies, their hoarse cries whipping the animals into action. They plunged into the water, the stallions leading, the mares following, neighing encouragement to their colts. "They're off!" shouted Wild Maddox, and everyone felt the relief and triumph of his words. All right, so that's all we're going to read today. So let's go back to the page we began, page 160. Ask a few questions. All right, so what does the author say that they're chasing? Look right up there. It's in the very first paragraph on page 160 where it says, "Watch Eyes plunged on." In that paragraph, what does it say? What does the author say that they're chasing? Did you find it? A mirage. Do you know what a mirage is? It's like a hallucination. It's something that looks like it's there, but it's not. What does Paul see that makes him awestruck? Remember, it was that long tail of silver and copper that could have been the phantom's tail, which we know now that it was. What has Paul been describing as mist? The new colt. He kept seeing it, and he wasn't thinking in his mind it was a new colt. He was just thinking of what he was seeing. His mind was telling him it was like mist that was just kind of floating around. All right, let's look back at the page that we just finished, all the way over to page 163. Why does Paul want to swim his mount beside the phantom? I think he probably wants to watch the colt, because they're saying they don't know if the colt will make it, and I think he wants to make sure that that the colt makes it. Let's look at the explanation that Wild Maddox gives of why Paul can't ride his mount across. So it's going to be on page 163. It's going to be the second paragraph where it says Wild shook his head. I want you to read that short paragraph out loud. Why do you think the roundup men feel relief and triumph as the ponies begin to swim the island? Well, they see that their job is done, that they've done it, and they've done it well, and it's over. So all that excitement and all that hard work is now at an end. And so it probably just makes them feel better. Okay, so you can go ahead and I think you can close your book. You're not going to need your book, but let's think ahead to the next week when we do the next lesson. Now, do you think the colt will be able to make the swim? And will all that Maureen and Paul have hoped for come true? There's your questions. All right, close your book and get your work text out. We have 2 work text pages to work on today. One of them is for a grade, and that's going to be page 66. I want you to do page 66. These are vocabulary words. Use the glossary in the back of your book if you need to, okay? So it's going to be worth 10 points. And then let's look at page 67 before you start page 66. Let's look at 67. Now, page 67, I want to check, but I'm not going to grade. Okay, now this is kind of going over all the things that we've learned about while we've been doing our skill station days, where we've been learning how to divide words. Like I said, you might think this is not important, but learning how to divide words will not only make you a great reader, it'll also make you a very good speller, a very strong speller. So up at the very top, it says, write each word from the water tank, and the water tank's right there in the center of the page, with the rule that tells how to divide it into syllables. Divide each word as you write it. So I'm going to help you with number 1 on both sections, and then I'm going to have you finish it. Again, I'm not going to grade it, but I just want to see, your understanding of this, okay? All right, so up at the top, there are 5 blanks, and then there's a water trough. And then at the bottom, there are 5 more blanks. So let's look at the top 5 blanks. Do you see the blue box to the left of the horse? That tells us to divide words into syllables between consonants. So we're going to try to look for, in that water trough, 5 words that is split with the VCCV, where you have vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. Look in there and see if you can find a word that would be split, in syllables. When you clap, it would be split between V, C, C, V. Now, you may have chosen struggle, but look at the bottom part. You see that blue box down at the bottom? These are words ending with a consonant LE, okay? So struggle is actually going to go down there, okay? You can actually go ahead and write struggle down there on number 1 if you want to. Make sure when you write it that you put the dot where it goes. And you should put the dot between the 2 G's, because it's UGGL. That's vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. So the rule is it needs to go between the 2 consonants, okay? Can you find the word up at the top that should go on number 1? Did you say guffaw? Okay, guffaw. That's going to fall under the VCCV pattern, and you're going to spell it and put the dot between the 2 F's. Okay. All right. So I'd like for you to finish that page. I want to see how much you're understanding on the word divisions and the syllables. Okay. And then I want you to do page 66 for a grade, and use your glossary if you need to. Okay. That is all for today.